The future of Final Fantasy XIV is up in the air, people, and it's up to us to piece the pieces of the puzzle together into a cohesive whole to better understand the future of this story. I asked you, yes, you, for your best theories for the future of FF14, and now it's time to react to them. We got some juicy ones, people. Hello, everybody. It's your boy Jmulls, and let's wither and roll. Dang, I'm good.
But before we go,
let's begin with a take from @DemonBato, who says, first time commenting here. Hello. Thought I'd give you mine since it's been killing me here too. I think we may be going to the north of Othard. Now, I agree. I think we're gonna go there. I'm just not convinced we're going there in 8.0. One of the theories I've been talking about a lot on this channel is the idea that this new narrative arc is gonna be broken up seasonally. What do I mean by that? Well, they kept yapping on about how Dawntrail was supposed to be the summer vacation, and now we got a group called Winter. So I think like each of these expansions are going to represent a different season. Dawntrail was summer. I think 8.0 will be autumn. Then 9.0 will be like winter. And then 10.0 will probably be spring. Now, they might not stick to that as like a hard rule. Like maybe they do something where, oh, 7.0 to 7.3 was the summer vacation. Then 0.4 to 0.5 was fall. Then 8.0 is like winter. They could do something crazy like that. It was like 8.0 and 9.0 is the winter. It's like a long winter. It really does depend upon the specific story they actually end up telling. I just think roughly we'll be able to divide this next story arc into these seasons. I think Othard makes a lot of sense when we get to the winter portion. Blind Frost, you know? And you may be going, well, what's so special about the north of Othard? Blind Frost, right? Like, what's so special about that? Well, back in Ultima Thule, when Emmett Silk was given the biggest yap sesh of all time, and basically telling us to retread Azim's journey, one of the locations he pointed out was Othard's north. And unless my brain is on the fritz, I don't recall us actually going there since, well, Ultima Thule. So, because every other location really feels like we've just been running down the list of what Emmett Silk says, it does feel inevitable that at some point we're going to go to Othard, specifically the north of Othard, right? Maybe it could be like in a dungeon or in a Bosja/Eureka type of content, maybe even a variant dungeon, something like that. Maybe we go there in a piece of side content or like a raid. It really wouldn't surprise me though if it ends up becoming a zone. Or maybe just like the entire location that we go to in like 9.0, just depending upon how they actually build up that part of the world. It really wouldn't surprise me at all. To me, it's like one of two locations that feel absolutely inevitable. The other being Mericidia. Just, we know we're not going to Mericidia next because Yoshi P was basically like, we're not going there anytime soon.
but before we go,
Next up, we have @TisaTouch, who says, a shard with Final Fantasy X because Anakin and BLITZBALL, because come on, Square Enix, please! We know Final Fantasy XIV is no aversion to doing very in-your-face references to previous Final Fantasies, and BLITZBALL has become quite a bit of a meme over the course of Final Fantasy XIV's tenure, and it really wouldn't surprise me if at some point they do something very in-your-face with Final Fantasy X. They've done it with 4, they've done it with 9, they've done it with 8, they've done it with 12. Okay, it was more tactics, but still, right? Like, they've done it plenty of times before, and 10 being one of the most beloved Final Fantasy games, really it feels like an inevitability. And there was one thing that really makes me think we may actually see them lean more into Final Fantasy X sooner rather than later. Because we have this little note that Yoshi P shared for New Year's. I talked about it before, but let's go over it once more. Past the stern, we scan the sea, thank God I can read cursive, in search of that which yet may be, not Drake may, unfortunately, frail playthings of the restless tide, yet wind and wave shall be our guide. Very watery. So if the next location that we go to involves a lot of water, right? Like, you can argue that's a stretch. Absolutely. But we have seen them do more with less. I mean, come on. Solution 9 and Heritage Found being a giant reference to Final Fantasy IX, right? Like, it doesn't have to be a one-for-one, oh, this is Anakin or anything like that. But it really wouldn't surprise me if at some point they do something very much in your face with Final Fantasy X. And maybe it's not for the main story. Maybe they do it something in the vein for like a raid series or something along those lines. But it really wouldn't surprise me if at some point in the near future, we see them lean more into Final Fantasy X for some of these references, because as I think Dawn Trail and the patches really showed, the same thing with the patches of Endwalker, right? Like, they can do these references to these older games, but they find a way to make it their own, to where you don't feel the need to have played Final Fantasy IV to understand the patches of Endwalker. You don't feel the need to understand all of Final Fantasy IX to get the story of Dawn Trail and the patches. Does it make some moments cooler? Sure, absolutely. But is it required reading? Absolutely not. And it really wouldn't surprise me if they use something along those lines for Final Fantasy X with the next expansion, especially if it's going to be more nautical themed. I mean, come on, that's just a match made in heaven. And it's also an aesthetic in a Final Fantasy game that a lot of people really love and cherish. If you need to come out of the gate running, like, this is definitely one way you can do that.
But before we go,
now, going off of that, we have something very interesting to think about. We have at LIJXFVKINBVY, my favorite radio station, who asks, could the wind and wave be the key ingredient to save the ninth? Now, I think this is a really interesting follow-up to the previous theory, because it works off of this poem Yoshi P put out for New Year's, right? Our past astern, we scan the sea in search of that which yet may be. Frail playthings of the restless tide, yet wind and wave shall be our guide. I think it's really interesting to think about, because the ninth has this overabundance of lightning aspect at Ether, right? And we just spent a non-insignificant amount of time building up the first and the 13th. The first has this overabundance of light ether. The 13th is the void. We theorize, well, maybe we could start to heal both of these worlds by pumping ether from one world into the other, to basically try to reestablish some kind of equilibrium. It wouldn't be an instantaneous thing, but a way to try and get balance back. So maybe they could work off of that logic that they already established in the MSQ for the ninth, where it's like, if they don't go the route where the ninth just gets wiped out for the Great Withering, which personally I hope they do, I think that'd be a really cool moment. But if they don't go that route and they set it up so that we can save the ninth somehow, going off of that logic from the first and the 13th and saying, hey, okay, we have lightning aspected ether. What if we infuse the ninth with other elements to try to reestablish some kind of equilibrium? Now, there's a slight issue here. Wind and wave would be water and air, right? Well, if we go back to Shadowbringers, and when Urianger yapped on about this astral and umbral chart, if we look at the alignment, lining is with astral, but so is wind and fire. Meanwhile, for umbral, it's earth, ice, and water. So wind and water are not necessarily opposed to lightning. So they could write it in such a way, right, where there's some kind of like golden ratio that needs to be achieved in order for the world to correct itself or to just sustain itself, and somehow that can be achieved by pumping or removing water and wind from the ninth. I'm not sold that's going to be the exact way we go about it, but it really wouldn't surprise me if by following something like this, like we did for the first and the 13th, but for the other shards, that really wouldn't surprise me. But there is something really interesting here. One, it's more general rule of thumb than just saying, oh, fire has to be astral or fire has to be umbral. It's just more often than not, fire tends to be astral, but it can be the other. But also, I don't have this book, so I'm going off the fandom here, right? In Essences and Permutations, a treatise of the 6 elements. Let's read this and see if this sounds somewhat akin to what we're talking about. The spark of lightning ignites when it strikes, and thus fire is born. The heat of fire renders to ash all that it touches, and thus earth is born. The density of earth shuns sun and harbors cold, and thus ice is born. The armor of ice melts away, and thus water is born. Now here we go. The moistness of water, mists and rises, and thus wind is born. The gusts and sighs of wind gather the clouds, and thus lightning is born. So in the last 2 lines here, we go from water to wind to lightning. So maybe that could be the connection here. There's also always the spanner that can be thrown into the works, and they just add some new big lore revelation on top of everything that we know. Kind of like what they did back in Shadowbringers that recontextualizes everything or just changes our fundamental understanding of just how all the elements and the ethers like work with each other.
but before we go,
And here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with your own theory about where the future of this story is going to go. I want your wildest, I want your wackiest theories, and I may react to them in a future video because, oh my god, there were so many. And there was so many. But you know what? We're going to be covering even more tomorrow. And if you want to see even more, make sure to leave a like and subscribe so you can stay up to date for when all that goodness happens. And are you curious about that poem that we covered throughout this video? Well, I go into far more detail about it in this video. That totally came out on New Year's, trust. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.